March 8th had always been a peculiar day in the small town of Willow Creek. Legends whispered among the townsfolk spoke of an ancient curse that hung over the date, but most dismissed it as mere superstition. Yet, every year as March 8th approached, an eerie tension settled over the town like a thick fog, and strange occurrences became commonplace. This year was no different. As the sun dipped below the horizon on March 7th, a chill wind swept through Willow Creek, carrying with it an ominous foreboding. Rachel, a young woman who had recently moved to the town, couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her bones. Ignoring the warnings of the locals, Rachel decided to spend March 8th exploring the nearby forest. She had always been drawn to the unknown, and the whispers of the cursed day only fueled her curiosity. With a backpack slung over her shoulder, Rachel set off into the dense woods, the shadows growing longer with each step she took. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around her, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air grew thick and heavy, and Rachel's heart raced with a sense of impending dread. But still, she pressed on, determined to uncover the truth behind the town's dark secret. Suddenly, Rachel stumbled upon an ancient-looking cabin nestled deep within the trees. It stood tall and forbidding, its windows boarded up and its door hanging off its hinges. Despite the overwhelming sense of danger that emanated from the cabin, Rachel felt an irresistible pull drawing her closer. With trembling hands, she pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The air was stale and musty, and the floorboards groaned beneath her feet. Shadows danced along the walls, casting strange shapes that seemed to shift and writhe in the dim light. As Rachel explored the cabin, she came upon a hidden trapdoor concealed beneath a threadbare rug. With a sense of trepidation, she lifted the door and descended into the darkness below. What she found there would haunt her nightmares for years to come. The basement was a labyrinth of winding corridors and hidden chambers, its walls adorned with grotesque symbols and ancient runes. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and Rachel could hear the faint sound of whispers echoing through the darkness. Suddenly, a chill ran down her spine as she realized she was not alone. Something sinister lurked in the shadows, its presence filling the air with malevolence. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to find her way out of the maze-like basement, but every turn seemed to lead her deeper into the darkness. Just as she feared she would never escape, Rachel stumbled upon a flickering light at the end of a narrow corridor. With a renewed sense of hope, she raced towards it, desperate to break free from the nightmare that had consumed her. But as she reached the light, Rachel's blood ran cold. Before her stood a grotesque figure, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It reached out with twisted claws, its mouth twisted into a sinister grin. With a scream, Rachel turned and fled, her footsteps echoing through the darkness as she raced back towards the surface. The air grew colder with each passing moment, and the whispers grew louder, filling her mind with terror. Finally, Rachel burst out of the cabin and into the light of day, her heart pounding in her chest. She stumbled back towards town, her mind reeling with the horrors she had witnessed. And as she looked back over her shoulder, she knew that March 8th would forever be a day of darkness and dread in Willow Creek. Rachel stumbled out of the woods, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she collapsed onto the damp ground. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion, the images of the sinister figure in the cabin basement burned into her memory like a brand. As she lay there, trembling and exhausted, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her from the shadows. The sun had begun to set, casting long, ominous shadows across the forest floor, and Rachel knew she had to find safety before darkness fell completely. Summoning every last ounce of strength, Rachel pushed herself to her feet and stumbled back towards town. The journey felt like an eternity, each step a struggle against the encroaching darkness that seemed to swallow her whole. But finally, after what felt like hours, Rachel emerged from the forest and into the safety of Willow Creek. The town was quiet as Rachel made her way through its deserted streets, the eerie stillness broken only by the distant sound of a lone dog barking in the distance. Every shadow seemed to hide a lurking threat, and Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. As she reached her small apartment on the outskirts of town, Rachel fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She pushed open the door and stumbled inside, collapsing onto the threadbare couch in the living room. The events of the day played over and over in her mind, each moment more terrifying than the last. But as Rachel lay there, trying to make sense of what had happened, she became aware of a strange sound coming from the darkness outside. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone or something tapping on the window with long, bony fingers. Rachel froze, her heart pounding in her chest as she listened to the sound growing louder and louder. With trembling hands, she forced herself to her feet and crept towards the window, her breath catching in her throat as she peered out into the night. What she saw made her blood run cold. Standing in the darkness just beyond the window was the same grotesque figure she had encountered in the cabin basement. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its twisted claws scraped against the glass as it reached out towards her with a hungry leer. With a scream, Rachel stumbled backwards, her mind consumed with terror. She raced through the apartment, bolting the doors and windows as she desperately tried to escape the nightmare that had followed her home. But no matter how hard she tried, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was trapped in a waking nightmare from which there was no escape. The sinister figure continued to haunt her every waking moment, its presence a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, Rachel collapsed onto the floor in exhaustion, her mind consumed by the darkness that had consumed her soul. And as she closed her eyes and drifted into an uneasy sleep, she knew that the nightmare of March 8th would never truly be over. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the memory of that fateful March 8th never left Rachel's mind. The encounter with the sinister figure had left her shaken to her core, and she found herself living in a constant state of fear, never knowing when the darkness might return to claim her once more. Despite her best efforts to move on with her life, Rachel found herself consumed by paranoia, convinced that the sinister figure was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sleep became a distant memory as nightmares plagued her every night, their twisted visions a cruel reminder of the horrors she had witnessed. As the anniversary of March 8th approached once more, Rachel's anxiety reached a fever pitch. She became increasingly withdrawn, her once vibrant personality overshadowed by the weight of her fear. The townsfolk whispered behind her back, their eyes filled with pity and suspicion, but Rachel paid them no mind. She knew that she was the only one who truly understood the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of Willow Creek. Determined to confront her demons once and for all, Rachel set out into the forest on the eve of March 8th, her heart pounding in her chest as she retraced her steps to the abandoned cabin. The air was heavy with the weight of impending doom, and Rachel could feel the eyes of unseen forces watching her every move. As she reached the cabin, Rachel hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door and stepping inside. The interior was just as she remembered it, the air thick with dust and decay. But there was something different this time, a sense of malevolence that hung in the air like a suffocating fog. With a trembling hand, Rachel descended into the basement once more, her footsteps echoing through the darkness as she navigated the maze-like corridors. But this time, she was not alone. As she reached the heart of the basement, Rachel came face to face with the sinister figure that had haunted her nightmares for so long. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its twisted claws reached out towards her with a hunger that sent chills down her spine. But instead of giving in to fear, Rachel found herself filled with a fierce determination. She refused to be a victim any longer, refused to let the darkness consume her soul. With a primal scream, she lashed out at the figure with all the strength she could muster, driving it back into the shadows where it belonged. As the figure vanished into the darkness, Rachel collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she finally allowed herself to release the pent-up fear and anguish that had consumed her for so long. She knew that the battle was far from over, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. As she emerged from the cabin and into the light of dawn, Rachel knew that she had faced her demons and emerged victorious. The darkness may always linger on the edges of her consciousness, but she would never again let it control her life. With a newfound sense of strength and determination, she set off into the world, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. In the aftermath of her confrontation with the sinister figure, Rachel's life began to slowly return to normalcy. The weight that had burdened her for so long began to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and resilience. With each passing day, she felt herself growing stronger, more determined to reclaim control of her life from the darkness that had once threatened to consume her. As the months stretched on, Rachel threw herself into her work and her relationships, determined to put the horrors of March 8th behind her once and for all. She reconnected with old friends and made new ones, filling her days with laughter and joy instead of fear and despair. But despite her best efforts to move on, Rachel could never quite shake the feeling that the darkness was still out there, lurking just beyond the edges of her consciousness. There were nights when she would wake in a cold sweat, the echoes of her nightmares still ringing in her ears. And there were moments when she would catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye, a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, only to vanish when she turned to confront it. Still, Rachel refused to let fear dictate her life. She had faced the darkness once before and emerged victorious, and she was determined to do so again. Armed with her newfound strength and resilience, she set out to confront the shadows that haunted her, determined to banish them from her life once and for all. With each passing day, Rachel delved deeper into the mysteries of Willow Creek, determined to uncover the truth behind the ancient curse that had plagued the town for centuries. She spent hours poring over old books and dusty manuscripts, searching for clues hidden in the pages of history. And slowly, but surely, she began to unravel the dark secrets that had been buried beneath the surface of Willow Creek for so long. She discovered tales of ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge, of dark forces that had been unleashed upon the world with devastating consequences. But the more she learned, the more Rachel realized that the darkness was not confined to Willow Creek alone. It was a pervasive force that stretched across time and space, threatening to consume everything in its path. Determined to put an end to the darkness once and for all, Rachel embarked on a perilous journey into the heart of the unknown. She traveled to far-off lands and distant realms, facing unimaginable horrors along the way. But with each trial she faced, Rachel grew stronger, her resolve unwavering in the face of adversity. And then, one fateful day, Rachel finally confronted the source of the darkness that had haunted her for so long. In a climactic showdown that spanned the very fabric of reality itself, she faced off against the ancient evil that had plagued Willow Creek for centuries. With every ounce of strength she possessed, Rachel fought back against the darkness, refusing to give in to fear or despair. And in the end, it was her courage and determination that emerged victorious, banishing the darkness from the world once and for all. As the sun rose on a new day, Rachel stood triumphant, the weight of the world lifted from her shoulders. She knew that the battle was far from over, that new challenges and trials awaited her in the days ahead. But armed with the knowledge that she had faced her demons and emerged victorious, Rachel was ready to face whatever the future might hold. For she knew that as long as she held fast to her strength and resilience, no darkness could ever truly extinguish the light within her.